It's been said that nothing endures but change. Well, that's most certainly true of DB2 data structures. Change endures, but enduring the changes may be a more accurate description of the environment. As applications have become more structurally complex and more mission-critical, changes to those applications have become more important. Yet the process of making changes to DB2 data structures has only become more complex, tedious, labor-intensive, error-prone, and more costly, but no more.
At BMC Software, developers have produced the first comprehensive change management product for DB2 data structures, Change Manager. Change Manager represents a breakthrough in DB2 administrative tool technology, and it's designed to meet today's concerns while also providing features for the future.
Solving the complex problems associated with automating the DB2 structure change process is nothing new to BMC. In 1987, we delivered Alter, the industry's first solution for DB2 change automation. Alter addressed the key concerns of the typical DB2 user, at that time the automation and simplification of the change process on a single subsystem. Alter also allowed an object structure to be copied from one DB2 subsystem to another. Alter provided and still provides the industry's best answer to those concerns. And now, as DB2 users encounter additional change management problems, Change Manager responds. Change Manager offers all the features of Alter, plus several other significant new features. Change Manager can automatically migrate all your changes from one DB2 subsystem to another. No longer does one version of the structure simply replace another. Now you can migrate only the changes and preserve any local modifications that were made to the data structures. When performing a change migration, the change information is transmitted in a language developed by BMC called CDL, or Change Definition Language. CDL significantly reduces the volume of information necessary to communicate the change, and it's very readable, so the receiver can make a judgment about applying the changes. And even if you're receiving changes from a source that doesn't happen to have Change Manager, you can still use change migration. The entire process can be controlled by either the sender or the receiver. Another feature of Change Manager enables you to return to a previous data structure with or without the most current version of the data. Suppose a changed structure doesn't perform as anticipated. Just fall back to a previous version, convert and take the updated data with you, or restore the old data. Change Manager also provides you with a feedback loop for changes. When emergency changes are made to a data structure outside of the control subsystem, the feedback loop gives you the ability to communicate changes back to the control point and therefore resynchronize the structures. And if you select a case tool as your control point, you can use Change Manager to synchronize all your data structures, from the initial design through the entire life cycle of the application. When the design specifications are incomplete and you later make changes to them in the development cycle, those changes can now be fed back to the case tool. This keeps the logical and physical structures in sync. And when controlled changes are made to the data structure in any DB2 subsystem, they can easily be fed back to the case tool, then deployed to all the other subsystems having a need for that application. Change recording techniques produce a record of the net changes that have occurred to your data structures between 2 points in time. Undoubtedly, Change Manager provides comprehensive solutions to the ever-present challenge of managing changes to DB2 data structures. Its powerful and flexible features automate the many manual DB2 change management tasks. Change Manager is the only product that addresses all these needs. It's the only product that gives you complete power over the DB2 data structure change process. And it's the one solution for all your DB2 change management challenges. The solution comes from BMC Software, a company that ranks above all others in customer satisfaction.
According to a recent DB2 market survey by Sentry Market Research, more DB2 customers plan to purchase DB2 utilities and data migration tools from BMC this year than from all other vendors combined. Customers' preference for BMC products is no accident. For the past 3 years, BMC has been the front runner in the number of DB2 installations, surpassing all other tool vendors.
In another independent market study prepared by the Gartner Group and published by Soundview Financial Group, BMC was ranked number 1 in product reliability, number 1 in ease of use, and number 1 in commitment to IBM strategies. The study concluded that one name seemed remarkably high in almost every category: BMC. There's a reason customers consistently choose BMC software over other vendors. BMC provides total leadership. If you're looking for complete solutions to real-world problems, look no further. Trust the leader, BMC Software. You've just seen a brief overview of Change Manager, BMC's newest and most comprehensive DB2 administrative product. I'd like to spend the next few minutes discussing how you can benefit from the state-of-the-art features provided by Change Manager. The features within Change Manager are rather like a toolkit that give users control over DB2 data structure changes. In addition to some very advanced capabilities, Change Manager's toolkit also includes all the functions of the industry's first change management product, Alter. So let's begin by taking a look at Alter's technology.
Before Alter, managing DB2 change meant you would first analyze the impact of the change on all the dependent structures, and then devise a plan that would drop the definition, create a new definition, and finally recreate the entire substructure of that object. It was a time-consuming and error-prone procedure.
For a number of years now, Alter has provided a change implementation solution that simplifies the process. Once the changes are specified, Alter analyzes the impact of these changes, identifies the dependent objects, then creates a work list to implement the changes while preserving the dependent structures and the data. Change Manager incorporates Alter's ability to automate the change process. If you change the definition of a DB2 object, Change Manager will preserve or convert the data, preserve dependent structures, and propagate the changes to dependent structures. For example, prior to Alter, if you wanted to change a tablespace organization from simple to segmented, the existing tablespace would have to be dropped, then recreated in a segmented format. And all the dependencies that were lost as part of that drop would have to be rebuilt. That's not the case with Alter and Change Manager. When a tablespace format change requires dropping a tablespace, Change Manager automatically recreates the tables, indexes, and other dependent objects. So the tablespace and its dependencies don't have to be manually rebuilt.
During this change implementation process, the tablespace data is automatically unloaded, then reloaded after the tablespaces are created. The elapsed time for this procedure can be significantly improved through the use of BMC's high-speed utilities Unload Plus and Load Plus for DB2. These utilities increase the speed and reduce the number of steps required for the unload and load processes, which greatly enhances the performance of Change Manager.
Like Alter, Change Manager also allows an object structure to be copied from one DB2 subsystem to another, or to be cloned within a subsystem. This is known as structure migration. Let's look at how this works.
In a typical DB2 environment, the processes can be divided into 4 major phases: design, development, test, and production. Most shops employ separate DB2 subsystems for development, test, and production. As part of the development cycle, an application structure might exist on one subsystem, but not another. When it comes time to move the application's data structure from, say, test to production, you need a tool to automate that process. For several years, BMC's Alter has provided a way to automate the migration of data structures from one DB2 subsystem to another.
Alter and Change Manager also allow you to move data at the same time structures are copied. This would be important when an application has a table that cross-references data that's essential to the application, such as zip code cross-reference to city and state. You'd want that table and its data to move with the application structure. Change Manager and Alter allow you to do that. You can generate a migrate work list which moves structures and optionally their data from the origin to the destination. So you can selectively pull data from one DB2 subsystem to another while you're copying the data structures. Over the years, Alter has given users great flexibility in moving and copying data structures. As DB2 has become increasingly prevalent, users require more than automated moving and copying.
For example, say I have an application out here in production that's been in place nearly 2 years. During that time, I've made several local changes to it for reasons of security, performance, or data use. The application structure now differs from the original in several ways. It has a special index, different storage parameters, and unique object names. These kinds of local changes were made for very important reasons, and they need to be retained. Now, what if an application structure must be updated to include new requirements? Prior to Change Manager, you'd probably enter the changes in the development subsystem. After validating the changes, you'd then re-enter the same changes in the production system.
This process of manually entering the changes twice is time-consuming, error-prone, and frustrating. But Change Manager from BMC Software solves that problem once and for all. Change Manager will preserve local changes through a process called change migration, which works like this.
The first time you decide to implement a new version of a data structure, you'd create a special feature called a baseline profile, which identifies the objects in your application. This profile is then used to establish a baseline. A baseline captures an application's data structures from the DB2 catalog or a DDL file at a specific point in time. Then when a new version is ready to be implemented, you'd take a baseline of the new version. Next, you select a feature of Change Manager called Compare. It compares the two baselines and generates a file containing a BMC proprietary language called Change Definition Language, or CDL. The CDL contains the net differences between the two sets of structure definitions. In other words, CDL contains only the changes necessary for altering the old version into the new version. Change Manager will update the target subsystems with the changes by importing the CDL, then analyze the requested changes to make sure there are no conflicts in applying them, devise the most efficient process for implementation, create a work list, and execute the commands.
Using BMC's CDL to migrate changes has many advantages. As we've seen, when Change Manager uses CDL as input, it's able to retain local changes.
And since CDL transmits only the changes instead of the entire structure, it's more efficient. If you have regional communications links, the smaller CDL transmission represents a substantial savings in telecommunications costs. Additionally, CDL is transmitted in readable text format, which means the receiver can examine the changes and make judgments about applying them.
In addition to these advantages, CDL has some other very special characteristics. Say you renamed an object in version 1. How does CDL recognize that name change when it transmits the changes?
Change Manager records a name change in a set of tables that creates a reference of the former name to the new name. This table is populated when the user enters a change to the name of an object through Change Manager. This allows Compare to correctly generate CDL for those objects that have been renamed, rather than assuming an old object has been dropped and a new object is being created.
The change migration feature is Change Manager's unique way of migrating only the changes to the target subsystem. But what happens when the sender of the change doesn't have Change Manager? What if you're receiving new versions from a vendor, or from a case tool that's only capable of generating full application DDL? In any of these cases, you could still use change migration. With Change Manager, change migration can be controlled by the sender or the receiver. The process just demonstrated is an example of a sender-controlled change migration. Here's how it works when change migration is receiver-controlled.
If you're receiving changes generated outside of Change Manager, you'd probably receive complete versions of an application's data structure represented in DDL data streams. Instead of replacing version 1 with version 2, you'd use Change Manager to compare the DDL data streams and generate change specifications in the form of CDL. The CDL would be processed by Change Manager, which would in turn make the necessary changes to your application's data structures without affecting any of the local modifications.
Change migration also works within the same DB2 subsystem to update data structures. This can be useful if several developers are working on the same application. Because each developer would need their own copy of the structure, it would be critical that all copies of the structure be synchronized.
To synchronize the data structures using Change Manager, you'd use the structure migration process to provide each developer a complete copy. The only difference between the clones would be the names of the newly created objects, since duplicate objects with the same name aren't allowed by DB2 within the same subsystem. If a data structure change were necessary, the designated lead developer would implement the change at the control point, take new baselines, and use Compare to generate CDL. The CDL would be forwarded to each of the clones where the changes would be processed. In this way, the data structures would remain synchronized.
Change migration is a truly exciting and advanced technique. It'll forever modify the way we all think about change management. But it isn't the only advanced technique available through the features of Change Manager. Let's take a look at several other features and benefits of this product. As the developers at BMC Software were designing Change Manager, they listened to the people who use DB2 every day.
They heard their problems and concerns and incorporated solutions to those problems into Change Manager. One major concern voiced over and over was the inability to back out a change that had been made to an existing DB2 structure.
But unfortunately, we ran out of DASD space while we were building the new table space, and we're going to have to back it all out.
Say you're applying a new version of an application.
It's gonna take at least 8 hours,
As before,
and
the
maybe
first
twice
version of
that
the
much.
application has undergone several changes since it was put into production. But after the new version's changes have been applied, you discover that it won't work. Say, due to an application app-end, rebind failure, or perhaps DASD space problems.
We just don't have enough data.
At this point, you need to back out the change that you applied to your structure.
Yeah?
Or
We can pull
perhaps
some
you
of the
apply
jobs
the
off
change
system
and put
to
it into
speed things up a
production,
bit, but
believing
it's still
all
gonna
is
take
well.
some time to
But
load
then you
96
discover
million rows
performance
back into that
problems.
table.
You still need to fall back to your
I know,
old data
sir.
structure. But what
Well, we
happens to
didn't
all the
anticipate
updates
this.
that have been
It's
made to
just
the
when you
data?
add a column to a table of that.
Users have told us that even if they have image copies and are able to redefine the structure exactly as it was before, they still find it extremely difficult to perform a recovery. In the real world, recovery becomes a matter of tracking the changes and undoing them manually. To solve this problem, BMC developed the concept called structure recovery, the ability to return to any version of the DB2 structure defined at a previous point in time. You can restore data that was saved at that time or convert current data. Here's how it works.
You'll recall that the Change Manager has a feature called Baseline, which captures a set of data structure definitions from the DB2 catalog or a DDL file. A baseline can contain just the structures, or the structure as well as information about the data that was unloaded at the time the baseline was created. When the baseline contains both, it's called a full recovery baseline. To take advantage of structure and data recovery, you'd establish a full recovery baseline as your recovery point before installing a new version of a structure. After installation, if you need to fall back to a previous version, you could fall back to that recovery point. Change Manager, using its Compare facility, generates CDL that makes it possible to undo any changes applied to the baseline's data structures after the baseline was created. Then it restores the data structures and loads the old data, or converts and loads the current data depending on the options you select.
Through Change Manager's baseline feature, multiple versions of data and data structures can be maintained, which gives users maximum flexibility in recovery situations. You decide when you want to take a baseline. One option might be just prior to executing any work list. That way you always have a baseline in case you need to perform a structure recovery. The increasing complexity of the DB2 environment demands a tool like Change Manager for flexible structure recovery. Now, when you need to fall back to a previous version, Change Manager makes it a straightforward and simple process. Another feature of Change Manager gives you the ability to communicate changes back to other subsystems. Why is this so important? Well, in an ideal world, changes to any application structure would be made at the development phase, then deployed to test and production.
But in the real world, emergency changes are sometimes made in production. Not just local changes, but changes to the controlled data structures.
Let's face it, we all live in the real world. Changes are made to the data structures in production that are never relayed back to any of the other subsystems. Here's the dilemma. Let's say the production subsystem must make a change to a controlled structure. Somehow that change needs to be fed back to the control point. Fortunately, Change Manager provides a way to do just that. Basically, it's just change migration in reverse. Instead of engineering the changes in the control point and forwarding them to the production site, you identify the changes made at the production site and send them back. Here's how it works.
In the production subsystem, you take a baseline of the old data structure, make the emergency changes, and get the application running again. Then take a baseline of the changed data structure. Next, you select Change Manager's Compare facility, which generates CDL from the two baselines. This CDL is fed back to the control point, where the CDL is imported to update the data structures.
So Change Manager synchronizes the two physical structures. The changes made in production are now reflected at the control point. And the control point can migrate those changes to the other subsystems if needed. The feedback loop and change migration techniques provided by the features of Change Manager can also be used in another way, to interface to case tools.
Case tools have become very popular in recent years. And now a significant number of DB2 applications begin their life on some sort of design tool. When a case tool is used to define a data structure, it usually does so outside of DB2, frequently on a PC or advanced workstation. The business goals and objectives are fed into the design tool, and it designs the application. Once completed, the tool generates a string of DDL, which is then uploaded to the host and executed. At this point, the application exists in a DB2 subsystem.
Sometimes that's the last time the application interfaces with the design tool. If the application structure is later changed, the process of synchronizing the case tool to the application becomes difficult and time-consuming. And that's unfortunate, because the design tool is the best place to manage global application definitions. It's off the mainframe. It ties back to business goals, and it provides an excellent control point. Now, Change Manager gives us a way to interface with the case tools throughout the life cycle of the application.
When the application has been in production for a few months, a comparison of the two structures might show vast differences between the case tool version and the production version. This could be due to changes in authorizations, views, indexes, physical storage parameters, and so on.
Before Change Manager, if you wanted to resynchronize these two structures, it would be a complex and time-consuming task. It's so complex, in fact, some shops don't deal with the case tool once the application has been deployed. That is, of course, until now.
Now, when changes are applied to an application structures at any DB2 subsystem, you can perform a feedback of changes process to update the case tool definition of the data structures. This can be done when the case tool you're using is able to process BMC's exclusive change definition language. So, as changes are made in the DB2 subsystem, they can be fed back to the case tool. This interface resynchronizes the two structures.
More importantly, you can actually select your case tool as the place to make your design changes. Then the changes can be easily moved out from case to DB2. This process is greatly enhanced when using a case tool that can read and generate CDL. But even if your tool doesn't build CDL, using the change migration process, you can determine the net changes from your case tool and update the DB2 subsystem. The advantage is that the latest version of your application's data structures can now reside on the case tool. So you make emergency changes to your DB2 subsystems and feed the changes back. Or better yet, make the changes in the case tool and migrate them to your DB2 subsystems. Either way, you have the security of knowing your control point always has the latest version of the structure definition. This greatly enhances your investment in the case tool. The features of Change Manager can also be used to provide a record of the changes that have taken place on your DB2 subsystem.
Change Manager has the ability to capture a baseline of a data structure at any point in time. It stores these in what we call baseline tables. That way, Change Manager always knows the previous structure.
And because it always knows the previous structure, Change Manager can be used to determine the net differences between the old structure and a new structure at any time. To obtain a record of the changes, you can use Change Manager's Compare facility to generate a CDL file. You can also set up a procedure to automate this process.
When used for change recording purposes, Compare analyzes the differences between the old data structure stored in the baseline table and the data structure you specify. The CDL file generated by Compare represents the net changes made between the two structures.
The change recording function of Change Manager gives you the ability to identify the changes made to a DB2 object during a given period of time. This gives each site the ability to implement procedures to easily keep track of the changes made to DB2 objects. All of the features of Change Manager provide new ways to take control of DB2 change management. Now you have one flexible tool to automate changes across multiple DB2 subsystems and multiple locations.
And all Change Manager's features are enhanced by the use of BMC's high-speed utilities, Unload Plus and Load Plus for DB2. When used in conjunction with Change Manager, these utilities increase the speed and reduce the number of steps required for unloading and loading the data. Procedures such as change implementation, change migration, and structure recovery are especially enhanced by these time-saving features.
Change Manager provides options that have never been available before. In addition to incorporating the features of alter, change implementation, and structure migration, Change Manager also automates the processes of change migration, structure recovery, feedback of changes, and change recording. And it also provides a valuable interface to case tools. All these procedures were designed to meet the growing and evolving needs of DB2 users. As more and more shops move an increasing number of applications into the production environment across multiple DB2 subsystems and multiple locations, Change Manager is there with a solution. Our focus was to design a product to manage complex DB2 changes, to make the inevitable change process simpler and easier, to make life a little less complicated. In short, Change Manager was designed for you. Providing solutions to meet your needs is what BMC Software does best. That's why BMC is the industry's premier system software company. To find out more about Change Manager, call us today for a no-obligation 30-day-plus free trial to use in your DB2 production environment. See for yourself what a real difference Change Manager will make. BMC Software, the experience and the technology for the future.